Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And as we get started, I would love to introduce Howard Levy, our board director, to kick things off.
Thank you, Hannah. On behalf of the board of directors, the staff, and the authors of Four-Way, I'd like to welcome you to this second annual virtual benefit. Hopefully, we'll have a real benefit sometime soon. To begin to slightly paraphrase Stephen Sondheim, we, all of you, got through all of last year, and we're here. We're still here. That's remarkable and a wonder. And in fact, we got through 2020, and 2021 for Four-Way has been already an absolutely incredible year. As you probably know, John Murillo, his Contemporary American Poetry, won the Kingsley Tufts. It won the Four Quartets. It won the Poetry Society of Virginia. It's been an astonishing year, but John's not the only one. Tommy Blunt, his Fantasia for the Man in Blue, has been a finalist for the National Book Award, finalist for Kate Tufts' Discovery, and is a finalist for 3 more awards that have not yet been awarded. Additionally, in the Personal Challenge Poetry Awards, we have 1 gold, 2 silver, and 2 bronze. So all those people get to go to Tokyo. We're really pleased that you can be here tonight, and that for those of you who are being introduced to Four-Way, welcome, and for those of you who are deepening the relationship, welcome. And so I give you now Ryan Murphy, the director of Four-Way Books.
Good evening, everyone. I've worked at Four-Way Books for 16 years now, and as the new director, I have the pleasure of greeting you all. Our beloved Martha Rhodes has been elevated to the role of publisher, where she continues to actively acquire and edit books and maintain her stalwart oversight of and planning for the organization, both present and future. All of us at Four-Way Books, thank you for being here. To say that this past year has been an incredibly difficult and traumatic one would be an understatement. We've continued to see and or experience unjust deaths and racial unrest, a terrifying rise in hate crimes directed towards Asian Americans, on top of economic turmoil, isolation, and insurmountable loss. Throughout all of this, I have been touched, inspired, and honored to have had the good fortune to work with our amazing team and with our authors, whose writing has connected me to the humanity of all of these struggles. The good work of Four-Way Books has undeniably inspired me to get out of bed each morning during the worst year of my lifetime, of many people's lifetimes, because it is the writing itself and the writer's commitment to the page that challenges me, consoles me, and helps me feel less alone. And seeing the impact our authors' words have had in a world that seemed to be shrinking into loneliness has only reaffirmed for me the importance of literature in times of duress. It is a privilege to get to stand inside our authors' work, especially today, and I couldn't be prouder to share a small sample of it tonight. Stepping into the role of director, I'm dedicated to advancing the mission of this press to support work of extraordinary merit. This means continuing to stand beside those beloved authors that call Four-Way Books home, and working aggressively to find and promote the work of dynamic and diverse new and established voices. I promise to take my responsibility seriously and acknowledge that what makes the work that we publish is that it is not a monolith. The books on our list will continue to reflect the many stories all around us. Four-Way Books will commit even more now to creating a chorus of narratives, styles, and experiences in our catalog. We wouldn't be able to do this work without Sally Ball, Jeffrey Morehouse, Hannah Matheson, and all our screeners, proofreaders, and interns, as well as the many others whose work ensures that Four-Way Books titles are able to find their way to the world. I want to take this moment to thank the members of our board of directors for their commitment to our staff and authors. Your time, resources, and leadership have been instrumental in our continued success. And of course, you, our readers and supporters. Without you, Four-Way Books would not exist. Audiences and readers are at the heart of what keeps literature vital. It is not lost on us how lucky we are to have so many dedicated and loyal financial benefactors, and you remind us every day that the work that we do is important. It is my honor to turn the evening over to the poets. I trust that you will find their words tonight as urgent, exciting, and thought-provoking as we do. Our publicist, Hannah Matheson, will introduce tonight's readers. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hi, everyone. It's an honor to have joined Four-Way Books full-time this year, and it's a delight to be here with you tonight. Our first reader is Brian Komei Dempster. Widely published and anthologized, Brian Komei Dempster is the author of Topaz, winner of the 15 Bites 2014 Book Award in Poetry, and Seas, silver winner of a 2021 Human Relations Indie Book Award and finalist for the Eric Hoffer Award. Brian's poetry approaches the dialectics of fatherhood, intergenerational trauma, and race in America with formal inventiveness and imagistic acuity. With poems that look like they're about to take flight from the page, Brian writes a space where healing, profound love, and fierce clarity come to roost. Thank you for reading for us, Brian. You can take it away.
Wow, thank you, Hannah. And did you notice we just hit 100 participants? That's making me very happy. So I want to give a big thanks to Howard and the board. I want to send love out to Martha and Sally and Ryan and Hannah, and can't miss Clarissa too. She's a big part of this, and Bridget, who's an amazing proofreader, and everyone on the Four-Way team. Just much love to you all. I'm going to read two poems, and I'm going to start with one I think we're going to talk about later. It's the fulcrum of my second book, Seas. It's literally in the middle. And just a couple of pieces of context. One, my son Brendan is nonverbal and epileptic, and my partner's name is Grace, and her name definitely embodies who she is. The poem is called Broken. The park below gives us fire, orange leaves crackling over green. I gulped coffee as I drove. Grace held the cold cloth on his head. I do, he babbled his mantra. Our mouths chalked, minds chipped and torn away. He never gets better, I said. Her lips tightened. That doesn't help us. Back to our corners. Another night in ER. 2 bags of fluids through our 8-year-old son. A flock sweeps over, shadows the flame, spiking mercury, the night cracked into ice chips. His skin paling, seizing, stopped. Some couples like us end up broken, Grace says as she rubs my back. Not us, I tell her, my hand on his chest as he sleeps. Through the window, I see kids swinging into the sky, gulls rising, wings white as Brendan's shirt, the silk of Grace's gown. The long field flickering, she leans against me, our forms resting with his in glass. A whole life of I do. I want to give a shout out to my mom, Renko. As a child, she was incarcerated in Topaz prison camp, doesn't remember much of the experience. Mother's Day just passed, and My book looks at some of the intersections between my son's medical seizure and her historical seizure. This poem, written in her voice, is called My Mother Watches Horses with Brendan. Through the fence, you look out, their hooves breaking new earth, sleek fur, the shade of bourbon, kicking up clods of green, I wheel you closer to shaken ground. Grandson, at 10 years old, you pointed them. Once, I thought you said the word horse. Someday I'll paint you the story. Topaz rain galloped over roofs. Barracks thundered. We were the ones corralled. My hands on your shoulders. Your hand taps my wrist. Look, they are flying over crests of hills, running into the sky. Go far enough, speak what you can. There's love in silence. All things, they come and go. Thank you so much.
And that was so beautiful, and you chose one of my favorite poems. It was so gorgeous to hear. Next up, Ricardo Alberto Maldonado is the author of The Life Assignment and co-editor of Puerto Rico en mi corazón. Forthright, crystal-eyed, and dexterous in their movement between and within languages, Maldonado's poems investigate kinds of love like flipping through albums in a jukebox. These bilingual lyrics mark an electric debut collection we're lucky to hear from tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Hannah, Ryan, Martha, Clarissa, Sally, everyone at Four-Way. It has been a dream in anticipation of tonight. I was thinking of those I wanted to single out as part of my Four-Way family, and there were so many of them. So I'm really grateful that I was invited to be a part of this press. It's still a dream, and also they gave me the best back cover in the history of the world. I still get emails about it, so thank you, Ryan. I'm in Puerto Rico. My mom had a fall, and she's doing really well now, but I figured since I'm here, I might as well read two poems that I wrote about my mother or a mother, and they both took their origins as it was a response to a poem by Mahmoud Darwish. So I feel like it's apt to be also tipping my hat to him. So in defense of the life assignment, I started at the surface, feeling about my face the law jawbone my mother had given me as weapon against austerity. 2 decades before my father had died, I was desperate under summer's isosceles. A fragile machine descended with a yellowing haze on the city. Whom had I been then but the sediment inside that thing I named Ricardo Alberto? Blessed is he, blessed in the reddening of medical pins, blessed under fluorine yolks. I venerated my mother at Centro Medico, her prayer cards at midnight, the saffron of her blood tearing as it coursed, a thick mass on concrete inside coral. Mother, today, its nose in another city besieged by comet tails. You breathed that day, the sharp instrument of men on your heart. Waited, they waited. I remember the wings of your lung. It was midnight when I went in search of angels in the shoes of the sick near the gates of heaven. On the 7th day, we all take repose in the kingdom of the sick. Blessed are they, blessed the cold comfort of wind rushing over teeth. Blessed the long corridors of heaven. Blessed the gelatin in refrigerators, the instant coffee. Blessed our sentence of silver, of flowers. Blessed may they be, blessed. Mi mamá me ama. I have a moon. I had 6 mothers. In my poverty, is this all I have for myself? I was born like everyone in a house with one door. I have memories to revise. No doubt you'll find the expiration date. Mi mamá me ama. I laid waste to my health in the walls of her heart while regretting this analogy for the labor of a body. I had a house with 3 windows. I remembered her alone with her memories of youth. The deep-hearted course of one rough word turned judgment in my blood. That word was mother. As for her, this is the truth. When she cries for her mother, I dismantle all walls to extract her with one word. That word is mother. I learned her sacrifice and grace. I had one moon. Mother, teach me when to seek out. I'll note the expiration date. That's how I talked while my mother with fruit fed me. Thank you.
You guys are making me emotional with this beautiful poetry. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce our Associate Director with 4-Way Books since 1996, Sally Ball.
Hi, everybody. It fills me with joy and gratitude to see you all here tonight and to get to speak for a minute in the midst of our hearing together these beloved authors. I'm also excited about our forthcoming seasons, and I'm hopeful for your long-lasting support. The lists to come continue to showcase important, pioneering, virtuosic writers who offer both formal and technical innovation and attention to subject matters that are crucial and resonant all across contemporary American life. This includes thinking through a stand your ground shooting. It includes the idea of paradise and its gatekeepers. It includes the poor morgue where the unmourned line up in trucks, the red clay of South Carolina and the deep sea across which lies Africa, colonialism internalized, love over and over and over again, the first grainy pre-feminist days of television, and homemade sandwiches during a Mets game. Where are we? What made us? These questions provoke and console from book to book. Over this last year, I, who do my 4-Way work from afar, really far, Phoenix, have had the huge pleasure of seeing so many more of our launches and events as our publicity team has risen mightily to the challenge and helped invent this whole new realm of virtual connections between writers and readers. And I'm guessing that many of you too had more chances to attend events, to be in New York one night and Asheville another, or Boston, or LA, or all the places. We are grateful for your presence at those events and for your commitment to us, financial via major gifts and or recurring ones via both pledges and surprise generosities, via the standing order plan that fills your mailbox with all our titles twice a year. We are grateful when you buy a book to give a friend, teach one in your class, review one in the NYT or anywhere, slyly face them out on bookstore shelves. We do not need you any less, even as the world reawakens, even as we look forward to this party next year in person. We need you as much as we did last year and as much as we ever have, because 4-Way Books is 2 things at once. We're one of the most interesting, aesthetically diverse publishers thriving in the US, as the LA Review of Books described us, and we are a family as we describe each other. The last year has evinced again the bedrock commitment that 4-Way Books has to all its people, and I've been so moved to see the circle of mutual care between staff, authors, and supporters of all kinds. Thank you for your. The other day I was looking at envelope poems in the Gorge Things, and this phrase caught my eye. All times we met, estranged, however intimate. Hello, Zoom. But Emily's grief helixes is kind of a sweet for where we are, these soft assemblies, which let us be intimate, no matter how temporarily estranged. I'm very glad you're here. And now I'll turn it back to our new publicist, Anna Matheson, who is a boon to.
Thank you, Sally. That's so kind and so phenomenally put. Our third reader, Abigail Wender, is the author of Reliquary, a debut collection of sinewy poems that bear the weight of complex reckonings and incredible tenderness. Each poem feels like a thoughtfully arranged antechamber, spare, necessary, opening to a vast and beating heart. We're proud that she's our author and that she'll be sharing her poems.
Thank you very much. I forgot to unmute. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Four-Way. And it's so incredible to be part of this family. And in this terrible year, to have had my book come out was an incredible dream. So I'll just read a few poems. Much of this book focuses on the loss of a mother to actually hepatitis C due to a long opiate addiction. But I'll just jump in. Room with map. Where he leaned against pillows to laugh or weep, there was only the smell of antiseptic. No more breath of fire, breath of forgiveness, no gods to whom we gave sacrifice, the liver donor and A negative blood. Gone his wanting and mine. The room was empty. He was not returning. In his desk, I found a plastic bag with his broken prison Timex, but couldn't stop the sycamore tree from filling the windows of his apartment. How the bark curled, stained like an ancient map. Barn swallow. Shit streaks off the glass, and the swallow shrieks from a near tree. To see the eggs or the chicks, whichever's in the nest, on closer view, two nests side by side, how to keep close and away. Via negativa. This time I won't think the sky is falling while riding the bus to Rikers Island. In the prison waiting room, no guard will touch my shoulder, say, why so scared? This time I won't be afraid, won't flinch, won't shudder. Cameras won't seek us, clicking from every corner. And he won't ask if I have it, and I won't have it. Pressed into my sneaker, dope, like me, closed in a yellow balloon. Hiking. Hiking, I try to understand why countless unnamed pollutants poison our air, how millions of dollars were spent marketing opiates. Get in the swing with OxyContin. The mountain path ends in rock. Hiking, I break my walking stick. It's replaceable. There's a silence that's like unspoken complaints, two minds not making amends. At the meadow's edge, a scarlet tanager alights on a white pine. Are there words for us, America, high in the uppermost branches? I'll read this little poem, After Image. My mother dies, and I ignore the bulbs as they sprout in cold storage, anemic white stalks. Later, given dirt and light, an amaryllis chorus, crimson ladies, red trumpet throats, dissolving to black. Just two more, they're short, so. Where's this? In honor of our Asian and Indigenous Pacific Month, I wanted to read this poem called Post-Colonial. Most of you know my husband is from Sri Lanka, and that's my other country. Post-colonial, a Dutch cabinet opens, rush of mildew. It's the sea, he says, hair plump as a watered bush. He paces the house he was born in as if a part of him, unsuited for an immigrant's life, had remained stored with the batik shirts in the sandalwood Elmira. Tying his orange and black sarong around his waist, he surveys the garden, returns to the veranda. This man, the son of the son of the son, etc., and Asari halves my stride. Aunties and uncles wish us happy homecoming. Bring tea packets and ashtrays hammered into a teardrop shape. Love from Ceylon. I tell them we don't smoke. They shake their heads no, meaning yes. 3 a.m. jet lag. He's reading his father's old letters in the near dark office. On the desk, there's a typewriter. No new fingerprints on its keys. And from a black and white photo, one arm waving, his father appears to be calling. A son could do so much for his country. Yes, I say, meaning no. And just one short last poem. Fable. Oh, my children, the ant has a boulder in its mouth. Pale white ant rushes with a potato chip that fell yesterday from our table. I was like that once, moving rapidly, taking food home, bearing the weight, because an ant is a lever, its body of physics. The weight of the chip has no meaning to it. Oh, wonders of the world, I am nothing compared to the work. Thank you.
Abby, that was amazing. And now I'm suspicious that you guys have read my mind because of your poetry selections tonight. I love the ant poem. Our fourth and final reader before the Q&A, John Murillo, is the author of Contemporary American Poetry and Up Jump the Boogie, now reissued through 4-Way Books. Additionally, John has had a very busy year. Contemporary American Poetry has won the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, the Four Quartets Prize, and the North American Book Award. John's signature lyricism, his ability to weave together unexpected and seemingly disparate images into profound narrative, and his political daring and intimate candor make his poetry as admirable and lovely as he is. John, take it away.
Thank you, Hannah, for that introduction. And thank you for everything you do on behalf of 4-Way. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Martha, for believing me this whole way through. Martha's been there from the Fine Arts Work Center back when, before there was any book. Actually, that's not true. Lorraine Basilar, you'll remember when we read at, it was you, me, and Martha Collins. I had just gotten accepted to the Work Center, and I printed up a chapbook at my first press, Kinko's Publishing, and and I actually sold the book to get to be able to rent a moving truck to get up to Provincetown. Yeah, Martha's been there the whole time, and I want to really give a special shout out to 4-Way. The book came out on March 2nd of last year, and you all might remember AWP was that same week. And that's when, things started shutting down, and the whole tour just basically collapsed. And although there were a lot of, I think I might have mentioned this last year, although there were a lot of important things happening, and one doesn't want to feel selfish for thinking about this little book. The truth of the matter is, it took a decade to write the book, and the thought of it disappearing and dying on the vine, it broke my heart, if I can be honest. But Martha and Ryan and Clarissa and Sally and Hannah did not let the book die. They got the book out there. They made sure it got into people's hands, and it found readers. And because of them, I'm rich now. And I just want to thank you guys. I'm joking, I'm not rich. I'm rich in spirit. Four-way, I tell you, I can't think of another press that works as hard as Four-way does for its authors. So I'm really, really grateful to be a part of this family and this community. I'm going to read one poem, but it's a long one. I should also thank Daniel Tobin for a joke that he told a couple years ago at one of these benefits. He said, I'm reading two poems tonight, the Odyssey and the Iliad. And I've since used that joke plenty of times, and it lands every time. And sometimes I credit you, sometimes I don't, but it's a joke that keeps going. So tonight I'm reading only one poem, but it is a long poem, and it's called Dolores Maybe. Fun fact, Kamiko is here somewhere, I saw. This poem used to be called Dear Kamiko. I started a project. I wanted to, after one of my teachers and mentors, Philip Levine, died, I started to really think about the people that were still here and still in my life. And I wanted to write a series of poems dedicated to them, to give them their flowers while they were here. The poem in the book called Dear Yusuf is one of those. And this poem here was called Dear Kamiko. But the poem that I chose for it, ultimately, Dolores Maybe, served the poem better than what I intended. Still though, Kamiko, I want to dedicate the reading of this poem to you. I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I slept once in a field beyond the riverbank, a flock of nightjars watching over me. That was the summer a farmer found his daughter hanging in the hayloft and wished for the first time he had not touched her so. I wish I could say we were close, the girl and I mean, but only knew her to wave hello and walked her once halfway up the road before turning finally into my grandmother's yard. This was Ontario, California, 1983, which is to say there was no river and I wouldn't know a nightjar if it bit me. But the girl was real. And the day they found her, that was real. And the dress she wore, same as on our walk, periwinkle, she called it. I called it blue, blue with bright yellow flowers all over the dress and the flowers, they too were real. And on our walk, I remember we cut through the rail yard and came upon a dead coyote lying near the tracks. A frail and dusty heap of regret. He was companion to no one. Stone still, staring, our shadows stretched long and covering the animal. She told me something I want to say about loneliness. Something I've since forgotten, the way I've forgotten, though I can see her face as if she were standing right here, her very name. Let's call her Dolores, from dolor, Spanish for anguish. And whatever the sky, however lovely that afternoon, I remember mostly the wind, how a breeze unraveled what was left of a braid. And when I tried to brush from Dolores's brow a few loose strands, how she flinched, how she ran the rest of the way home, how I never saw her after that, except when they carried her from the barn, her periwinkle dress, her blue legs and arms, and the fields ablaze with daisies. I spent the rest of that summer in the rail yard with my dead coyote, watching trains loaded and leaving. All summer long, I'd pelt him with stones. All summer long, I'd use the stones to spell the girl's name, Dolores maybe. in the dirt. All summer long, fire ants crawled over and between each letter, her name, now its own small town. A season of heat and heavy rains washed my coyote to nothing, only teeth and a few stubborn bones that refused finally to go down. Weeks into autumn, someone found the father hanged from the same groaning tie beams, the hayloft black with bottleflies. But that was 1983, Ontario, California, which is to say the bottleflies are dead, so too the ants, and neither field nor barn is where I left it. I've never spoken to anyone about this until now, until you. I gathered a handful of my coyote's bones, his teeth, and strung them all on fishing wire, a talisman to ward off anguish, a talisman I held out to you. Now, please come closer. Take this from my hand. Thank you.
I love that poem more and more every time. A new and cherished member of the Four-Way Books family, Antonio de Jesús López is the winner of the Levis Prize in Poetry, selected by our very own Pulitzer Prize-winning author, Gregory Pardlow. He was recently elected to the City Council of East Palo Alto, California. His collection, Gentefication, is forthcoming this fall and will show audiences the reason for his rising star. Critical and robust lexicons, wide-ranging cultural references, authoritative resistance verse, and vivid, imaginative figurations. We're lucky to have him moderating tonight, and audience members, do feel free to ask questions in the chat.
Wow, I'm sort of blushing. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Howard. And just what a family to be a part of. And gosh, I'm still reeling from Murillo's reading, from Brian's reading, from Abby's reading. I have some questions prepared, and would love to just kind of start us off in that conversation, but really feel free to chime in. These are just some thoughts I've had the pleasure of reading these books in concert and conversation. And I do think it's concert because there's so much music that each one offers us, especially in this time. And so just to start us off, I want to turn to Abby first, if that's okay with you, Abby. And wanted to just ask, when we talk about poetry and why folks, whether folks who've been writing for 5 years or 5 months, oftentimes it's grief, oftentimes it's you're responding to a moment. And your work deals so much with this speaker's yearning to help loved ones through their ailments, whether inherited or acquired through abuse. You write in Reliquary. Am I pronouncing it right? Reliquary? Reliquary?
No, I say Reliquary. I have no idea.
Reliquary. Well, just that's the benefit of writing it. You kind of come off as knowing how to pronounce it. But at any rate, you write, quote, "Oh, his mind unfurls. He sings, hums a little tune that will undo him. Dusk splits the room in two. Can I keep him? Save him?" I love that line. There's both an admiration and also lament from the speaker toward the mind of the beloved. And so I want to ask you and open it up to the rest of the readers. Is the poem of the fallen, is the poem of the beloved and how they, of the fallen beloved above all, a reliquary to hold, quote, as you wrote, the speaker wrote, to hold my brother's gifts?
You mean, is a poem that is written about someone, an elegy, essentially a reliquary? That's how I'm understanding it. I never would have thought about that when I was writing. That never would have occurred to me. But I think looking at it backwards, yes, in a way, it's a way of holding something together so it doesn't completely dissipate. I know that memory is really an important issue in my book and in many books, But I think it was a way of making a kind of container. And I guess you're right, all poems are containers. So I'd love to hear what other people say. Yeah, it was my way.
Absolutely. Did any of the other readers want to chime in? I don't want to name folks or anything like that. I could if it's helpful, but just to folks feel inspired to respond.
Sure. I mean, I feel like Abby, you covered it. I feel like you're right. That tracks. I feel like generally when I sit down to write, I write at the moment of discovery, right? Like I sit down with the blank page in front of me, and whatever happens later is what happens, right? But that reading of the poem as commemorative appeals to me, but also leaves out a lot of other things that come into consideration, like when I'm doing the thing, right? So yeah.
Terrific. Unless, does anyone else want to chime in? Otherwise, we have a couple questions in the audience too. I think I'm going to weave between the questions we're getting in the audience and also stuff that we've had prepared. But anyone else want to chime in? No, there's a question by Jennifer that what advice on revision would you give to poets while they're finishing their first manuscript? So I see we have a very omnivorous crowd. Folks are, busily working and writing poems, maybe through the pandemic, finding time to do so. So what advice would this esteemed audience or the readers panel have on when they're finishing their first manuscripts? Anything come to mind? Any insights? Things to look out for?
I could jump in on this one.
Yeah.
I would just say stay open for as long as possible, right? I think for me, I've been thinking a lot these past few years about John Keats's notion of negative capability, right? The ability to exist in mystery without any irritable reaching after fact or reason. And I'm teaching a course right now. Actually, I just finished teaching on Monday, a course on radical revision. And one thing I try to get my students to adopt is the spirit of negative capability throughout the whole revision process, right? So 4, 5, 6, 27 drafts in, you still want to leave room, right, for something unexpected to happen. And I think working with Sally was really key for me in that sense, because, I'd have poems that, I felt were pretty close to being done, and Sally would make a suggestion. And big or small, these are all, very vital suggestions, right? There's a sign, I remember when I used to teach at Rutgers, above the copy machine, there was this on the wall. It said, "Let's eat, comma, grandma," like let's eat, grandma. And then it said, without the comma, "Let's eat, grandma." And, so the thing was, grammar and punctuation matters, right? So, all these changes that Sally would suggest were vital in making the poems be what they were. So, you want to stay open for as long as possible. And it's also a good idea to get readers that you trust.
I would second that with I like that I heard you say, John, that it took 12 years. I think you just said that, to write that book. My book took a very long time and had many, many, many different versions. And the poems changed, even though some of them are really old, they changed a lot during the process. So
I would like to third that. And I think I beat both of you. My first book took over 15 years. And I think my second book took about 14 years. And I think patience, letting the poems bake, letting, as John said, the idea of Keats' notion is great. So bringing in complication and the idea of mystery into things that feel static, changing point of view, changing the order. And to me, revision is actually akin to creation. I don't think it's just sort of line editing. I think it's also re-envisioning the entire poem and or the entire project. So I'm a big advocate, because I'm so slow and take forever, of the idea that why not create less books that you feel more confident in because you've let that process occur than trying to overproduce. So those are my 2 cents.
I want to chime in as well because I had a different experience, right? My book took more than a decade, but I can't really pinpoint it or come up with the right timeline, but it did take me a very long time to find my form. And so whenever I speak to a young writer, I say, make sure you have time to find your form, whatever that means. In my case, it took a very long time for me to start writing in Spanish primarily, and then translating, mistranslating into English for political reasons. And so for me, it took long until I found that. And then the poem started sort of like rethinking about themselves as I set out to write them. The experience of seeing the poem on the page changed dramatically for me after I got to that point.
Wow, those are all stunning answers, and I think the rest of the audience can also, and myself can also appreciate just how long and slow of a stew it is to really come to arrive to poems and language that really does justice to what the speaker's feeling, to what the moment calls. And Brian, I want to pivot to what you said. I think you said 15 years, but you know what? You took 15 years and you gave us this stellar book. I highly recommend folks to read C's. It's a gorgeous collection. I think you mentioned a bit about it triangulates that relationship. We have a son, a father, and a mother. We have historical seizures, physiological ones. It just does so much in such a single collection. And you read the poem Broken, and I want to take a moment to really close read, and I think it helps to come together and really focus on certain poems. Less is more, to really digest what's going on. And it's a poem about the speaker. There's been a night in the ER. By the end of the poem, it offers a reconciliation, and I'll just read a few lines from it, from the ending, because I think it's just stunning. Through the window, I see kids swinging into the sky, gulls rising, wings white as Brandon's shirt, the silk of Grace's gown, the long field flickering. She leans against me, our forms resting with his in glass, a whole life of I do. And it's just takes your breath. And I wanted to ask you a question in a poem that does so much, move us through so much affect, pain, but also pleasure, but also commitment. What do you see as poetry's ability to reconcile, to offer hope, to remake meaning from, and we all do this, remaking the meaning from situations and circumstances that are otherwise unfortunate, heartbreaking? What can poetry offer us, both as the authors of the poems, but also as their readers?
Beautiful question. You know, when my son was diagnosed in 2006, I really was shattered. And poetry was a way to, in a sense, there's a maelstrom of emotion. There was rage and shame and guilt and shock. And so initially it was more of therapeutic venting. And artistically, I don't know if those were even poems. And I think that's why it took so long. And so poetry was a way to process the emotion, number one. And I think in the shaping of it artistically, whether through metaphor, story, anecdote, line, that it helped me actually understand my emotions, but more importantly, to have autonomy and to realize I didn't have to stay stuck there in what John just called, you know, Keats' state of negative capability. As a Buddhist, I do believe that suffering and joy can be simultaneously experienced. And so I'm glad that the poem conveyed that, because that's what I felt and feel, is this deep love, but also, you know, some sense of loss, right? Until, as that poem moves, the title Broken is intentional, because the reconciliation may be somewhat surprising. And poetry and the book attempts to move from that in media res state of crisis towards reconciliation. And that's the arc and progression of the entire collection. But within that poem, I want the reader to experience that in a singular moment, that you're in the ER, your son is having seizures, and by the end of that moment, his calm and strength is what gives you that triangle of peace that you experience. And it's true that he babbled, I do. That's his language, his non-normative language. And of course, that reminded me of marriage vows. I hope that answers what you were asking. I love your question.
No, it absolutely does. And I want folks to chime in. Again, the question I was asking Brian is, what do we see as poetry's ability to reconcile, to offer hope? So many of our poems are dealing with personal anguish, anguish from the state, anguish from historic violence against certain groups. Do we see poetry as having that ability to remake meaning from situations? How does it do so in your work? Maybe we can start from there.
Well, I would just offer that to add to what Brian just said, which was powerful, is that for me, I think and I think you were saying this in a way just differently from the way I would. I think it's a way to, I don't know if you end up with, I guess you do personally end up with some reconciliation sometimes, but it's also a way of making sense out of what is essentially, I think, personally senseless. I mean, why is one person terribly ill? Or why is one person unable to function? Or why is one person given a way out and another person can't find that way? I think one of the things I always hold up to myself, put it on the wall, is writing is my way of making something understood that is otherwise not, I can't make sense out of. So it does feel very complicated at times for me to write. I think that's why I'm a very slow writer. Things are very fractured. So it just takes me a long time to comb through all those things. And I don't know that I always come to a reconciliation, but I certainly understand more than I did to begin with. And I do come in some ways I came to some peace that I had really understood something about my life and my brother, and, some different from when I began. So, but I don't know that all poetry needs to do that at all. And I think that there are things that you can't resign yourself to, that are not, they shouldn't be accepted. So.
No, thank you so much for that. Again, I'm just blown away by how, and I'm just going to go back to this recording and really just sit with what everyone is saying. I think it's one of those things where you have to kind of go back to it, sort of, and that's what I love about poetry. It teaches stillness. It teaches pause in such a high-paced world. There's one thing going from another, and so with that being said, I wanted to pivot to Ricardo, if it's okay, Ricardo, and I wanted to, when I read The Life Assignment, which I encourage everyone to read. And I agree, I think it's the best back cover I've ever seen. So shout out to you making that happen in Four-Way as well. There's this invasion of the state. You have these tender moments where the mother is talking, but then you have capitalism and notions of theory and political ideas. And there's this pressure that I get from the speaker, this economic pressure, this political pressure. One poem reads, I browse for an answer to the coarseness of the age. The erotics of the West, I now give as an immigrant. And I just wanted to ask you and the rest of the group, do you think that this age, there's so much information out there, has suited us as poets to be in a more advantaged position, right? We have these phones, we can have all access to all these theory, all these ideas and texts, given this enormous access, or is it a hypersaturation and everything's just so high paced, especially in New York, right? There's just this attention span is difficult. And so wanted to get your thoughts on that. What are we advantaged, less advantaged? Where are we at in terms of poetry in the age of information right now?
So that's a question I've been thinking about for a while since I got to see it beforehand, and I feel like I don't know how to answer that. That's the most honest way of answering. I feel like my poetry makes myself more legible to myself and perhaps those in the periphery. I don't know if that implies advantage. I know that I'm writing for myself. I know that I'm writing for those around me that I love. I don't know who else is reading, but I feel like I can go about being radically honest and kind to myself and those who I know are reading me. By which I mean the friends who write with me, whose words I write with, and also those I write against, and those probably are not friends. But I don't know. I don't see myself in an age. I see myself as, you know, the notion of colonialism has been lived experience for me for 40 years, and for my family, and so my question is like, why haven't people been paying attention until Maria, right? In the case of Puerto Rico. So I don't know how to answer that question, but rather be honest about where I am and what I feel like my poetry can do for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'm hearing you say is sort of poetry steers our attention and kind of tilts us in a different direction, right? And I really greatly appreciate that. Are there other folks that want to chime in, disagree?
Can you repeat the question, Antonio?
Yeah, for sure. Essentially saying that we're this age of, it's 2021. We have access to this, you know, supercomputers in our hands quicker than ever. And so there's Twitter sphere. There's all these different ways to access poems and texts. And so is that sort of splitting of ourselves in different areas, digitally, physically, does that make us more advantaged as poets because we have more information going on, or is it more difficult because we can't sit still, which I think is, at the end of the day, that's what poetry demands of us. So that's my question.
It's a great question. I don't know. I think at base, we are who we are, right? So those of us who are inclined to sit still, even with all this going on, will sit still. And those of us who are inclined to be distracted will be distracted. I think, I don't know what effect it has on poetry, meaning actual poems, but I do think that a lot of what you're talking about, like the advent of social media and a lot of these, this continual exposure to the successes and what have you of others, can, I think, distract people from the real work, right? You know, it's easy to get caught up in who's publishing where and who's winning what, right? And I think there was a question early on in the chat. Kamiko had asked about the 10 years, you know, spent writing the book. Part of that was spent doing this, yeah, because you know it can be difficult when you're writing something and working on it for a long time to look to your left and right and seeing, you know, peers, you know, and you know, it is I don't know. I think it's a different kind of discipline to be able to just remind oneself why you write and why you do this, and not to worry about these other things. But I do think that the devices and all these things really make it difficult.
Well, no, thank you. I just appreciate just the redirecting that you know, asking the question, but y'all just give me this organic way of looking at it. Here's how I see it. You know, it's sort of, so I appreciate it. I think we can all learn from it. One more question I'd like to end with you, Murillo, if that's all right, because I think so much of your book, I mean, it's an indictment of a system, but it's also an invitation. It's an invitation for us to reimagine community, what it looks like. And there's that beautiful tongue-in-cheek poem you have, the titular poem, and it's honest, it's comical. It also shows how deeply painful poetry can be sometimes. I recommend everyone read it. It's Contemporary American Poetry. Check it out. And how easily we just commodify community, split ourselves, the artifice, we're taking a selfie, but we're sort of nitpicking, oh, who won that award, who got that award, and there's envy and ego, and so there's almost like a solitude sometimes that we traverse as poets, even when we have these collectives, you know, especially poets of color, or any sort of women folks, any kind of history of being othered. And I guess my question is for everyone, for you, John, as we're on the come up and as folks are writing their first book, their second book, quote unquote, established, how do we create those alternative ways of gathering? I mean, I'm really blessed to be in this space because I feel like that's what it takes. But outside of it, how do we have those genuine spaces of celebration when there's so much pressure to gratify the ego, the sense of being snubbed because I didn't get X prize? How do we start that process of relating to each other without being judged, both like in the sense of a literary contest, but also socially? Ricardo, did you want to start? And maybe John or anyone?
I'll let John start, but I have an answer. I just started an online archive for Puerto Rican poets with funding from the Mellon Foundation, and that's covering poets on the archipelago and the diaspora. That's how we gather, especially those voices people don't necessarily pay attention to. So we create those spaces.
Yeah, that's dope. That's dope. Also, I think, you know, for me, it goes back to, you know, I was saying in response to the previous question, you know, it goes back to remembering that first impulse and why we come to this in the beginning, right? When I first started writing poems and taking it seriously, I didn't know what an NEA stood for. I didn't know what an MFA stood for, right? I just wanted to write poems that the people around me would dig. And I guess that is a form of validation, but, you know, I don't really see it that way. I see it more as I wanted to give them what they were giving me. Yeah. So even now when I write, you know, I still think of it that way. It's, you know, because you get lucky or you don't, you know. Like, for instance, I did win a couple of awards this year, but also there's many that I didn't win, right? So does that mean these 5 people in this room were right and these 5 people in this other room were wrong? Same poems. Nah, it just means that I got lucky on this particular day, right? So, you know, one's accolades aren't really commensurate with one's talent, you know, and vice versa. So what you do is you just write the best poems you can. And when I think of community, I think of, you know, who I'm writing for. You know, I'm writing for you, I'm writing for you, I'm writing for, you know, these people on the screen. And for that reason, you know, I always make this analogy about cooking, you know. You know, when you're in love, right, and you're cooking for somebody, I mean, you could just throw a tortilla on and, you know, slap some refried beans on it and just throw it on a plate, you know, and at the end of it, they won't be hungry anymore, right? But if you really love them, you know, you're gonna make sure that, you know, you have the garnish and, you know, the dry rubs, you know, all measured out, and you wanna make sure that you set the timer for the, right? Because you're cooking up a dish that is meant to nourish, but it's also meant to be delicious and to, you know, make their lives better. And for me, that's what the craft is. You know, you don't abide by certain techniques because they might win you a prize or get you a 10 at a slam. But if I'm writing a poem for Ricardo, yeah, I'm gonna cook up the most beautiful meal I can to feed Ricardo because I love him. Yeah, and to me, that's what it is. That's the work. And in that sense, that's how, you know, I'm kind of bringing in community into the writing.
Wow. Well, amen. I think church session is over. I think you took us home, John. Go ahead. Sorry?
No, I just said that was beautiful. I love the food analogy. I agree. Yeah. And
yeah, I just want to thank you all for the pleasure of moderating this discussion. Please buy all these books, y'all. You can read them in a sitting and be a better human being at the end of it. I look forward to just having another conversation with you all about this work, about community. But I want to let Murillo's words stay with us, and so I want to turn it over to Ryan to take us home. But thank you so much for this opportunity to moderate. Really, what a brilliant panel of writers. Gracias.
Thank you, guys. Antonio, John, Abby, Brian. It's terrific. You guys did such a wonderful job. And I just want to thank you all for being here tonight and for your continued support of Four Way Books. Remember that all the books, including those by tonight's readers, are available on our website. We have some time before we shut down for the night, so we should feel free to unmute and talk amongst ourselves and ask any questions. And again, just thank you all for attending, and readers, it was just a brilliant, brilliant job. So thank you so much. It was very exciting.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Martha Rhodes, for creating, for having us all on this screen. That's something that you did and that we'll always be grateful for.
Amen,
Yes.
Laurel.
Amen.
Great.
And also thank you, Antonio Lopez, for being such a great moderator and
Fabulous moderator.
So thoughtful. Really, really wonderful questions.